During Christmas dinner, my mother handed my post-op daughter a $5 gift card and said, "Maybe next year you will have an achievement worth celebrating." I have spent my entire life being the reliable son. I am the one who mows my parents' lawn, manages their retirement accounts, and shows up whenever their car makes a weird noise. My brother, Kevin, is the golden child. He moves from city to city, constantly asking for loans and sending postcards. My parents treat his rare phone calls like royal decrees. The breaking point came last December. My 10-year-old daughter, Lily, needed a minor but stressful heart procedure. It was scheduled for 2 days before Christmas. My parents had promised for months they would be there to sit with us in the waiting room. On the morning of the surgery, my dad called. He sounded hurried. He told me they couldn't make it because Kevin's son, Leo, had been moved up to the starting lineup for his middle school basketball tournament. He said they needed to be there to support the grandson who was truly excelling. He told me Lily would be fine and that they would see us at the family dinner on Christmas Eve. I sat in that hospital waiting room with my wife for 6 hours. Lily came through it perfectly, but the silence from my parents was deafening. No texts, no calls to check if she had woken up. Christmas Eve arrived. We decided to go, mostly because I wanted to look my father in the eye. When we walked in, the house was decorated like a palace. My parents and Kevin's family were already cheering around the fireplace. My mother didn't even ask how Lily was feeling. She just handed me a tray of drinks and told me to start serving guests. Then came the gifts. My parents sat in their armchairs and called the grandkids over one by one. They handed Leo a box containing a top-tier gaming laptop and a $1,000 check for his athletic future. They made a whole speech about how pride is earned through victory. Then they looked at Lily. My mother handed her a small, thin envelope. Inside was a $5 gift card to a fast food place and a printed photo of Leo holding his basketball trophy. My mother told Lily that maybe next year she would have an achievement worth celebrating with a real gift. Leo laughed and told Lily that losers get nuggets while winners get computers. My parents didn't correct him. They just smiled. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit. I walked over to the tree, picked up the laptop, and handed it back to my father. I told him that since he was so concerned with pride, he should be proud of the fact that he just lost his only local helping hand. I told my mother she could find someone else to drive her to her oncology appointments next month. We walked out. The drive home was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. That night, I sent a single text to the family group chat. I told them that we were officially resigning from the family and that they should lose my number. 2 weeks later, my father sent me a formal letter. He claimed that because I had used his lawnmower for the last 3 years, I owed him a rental fee of $2,000. He said if I didn't pay, he would take me to court. It was a pathetic attempt to force me to talk to him. I didn't pay. Instead, I sent him an itemized invoice for the last 5 years of my labor. I billed him for the kitchen remodel I did for free, the weekly landscaping, and the 24-hour on-call tech support I provided. The total came to $42,000. I included a note from my lawyer stating that if he wanted to go to court over a lawnmower, we could discuss the unpaid labor and the interest on the $5,000 loan I gave him for his roof in 2019. He dropped the legal threat immediately. In February, Kevin's new business venture, a luxury dog grooming franchise, went bankrupt. He had used my parents' house as collateral for the business loan. My parents called me sobbing, begging me to help them navigate the foreclosure. They said they were sorry and that they realized now that I was the one they could actually count on. I told them that was an interesting realization to have only when their roof was at stake. I told them to call the grandson they were so proud of and see if his basketball trophy could pay the mortgage. Then I hung up. I heard through a cousin that they had to sell the house and move into a small apartment near Kevin. Kevin, of course, hasn't visited them once since they ran out of money. Lily is doing great now. She joined the debate team and won her first local round last week. We took her out for a massive steak dinner to celebrate. She asked if we should send a picture to Grandma and Grandpa. I told her that we don't need to prove our worth to people who only value the scoreboard. The transition from the family home to our own quiet life wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. For years, I had this internal script running that said I was the glue holding everything together. I thought if I stopped mashing the buttons and fixing the leaks, the whole family ship would sink. It turns out the ship was already full of holes, and I was just the only one standing there with a bucket trying to bail out the ocean. When January hit, the silence was heavy. I kept checking my phone out of habit, expecting a text from my dad about his printer being broken, usually just unplugged, or my mom complaining about her neighbor's hedges. But the notifications didn't come. Instead, I spent those Saturday mornings actually sitting on my own patio with a coffee. I watched Lily recover. That was the real work. Seeing her go from pale and tired to running around the backyard with the dog was better than any thank you I never got from my parents. But my parents couldn't just let it go. They didn't know how to exist without a servant. About 3 weeks after the lawnmower invoice incident, the calls started coming from different numbers. My mother called from a burner phone or maybe a friend's house. "David," she said, her voice cracking in that way she knew always got to me. "I have my checkup on Tuesday. The oncologist needs to see the blood work. You know I can't drive after the sedative. Call Kevin," I said. "Kevin is in Chicago for a conference." She snapped, the mask slipping for a second. "He's doing big things. He can't just drop everything for a car ride. You're right there." "I'm not right there, Mom. I'm at work. And after work, I'm taking Lily to physical therapy. You know, the heart surgery you missed? Don't be dramatic," she said. "She's fine. Leo had a championship game. Priorities, David." I hung up. I didn't even feel the guilt I expected. It was like a circuit had finally tripped in my brain. If my daughter's heart wasn't a priority, her car ride wasn't even on the list. The real drama started when the bank notices began arriving at their house. My father had always been old school about money, which was a polite way of saying he was arrogant and illiterate when it came to modern financing. He had signed off as a guarantor for Kevin's Doggy Day Spa franchise without even reading the fine print. Kevin had told them it was a sure thing and that they'd be millionaires by summer. Kevin, meanwhile, was living it up. He was posting photos on Instagram from high-end steakhouses in Chicago, wearing suits that cost more than my mortgage, while the interest on the business loan was compounding at a predatory rate. By late March, the Doggy Day Spa was a ghost town. Turns out, people in a mid-range suburb aren't willing to pay $80 for a canine blueberry facial when the economy is tightening. Kevin did what he always does when things get real. April, he vanished. He didn't file for bankruptcy, he just stopped answering his phone and moved to a different rental in a different city. That left my parents holding a six-figure debt with a house that was already leveraged to the hilt. My father showed up at my front door on a Tuesday night. It was raining, and he looked smaller than I remembered. He didn't have his usual swagger. He didn't mention the lawnmower. "They're taking the house, Dave," he said. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there on the porch. "The bank. They sent a sheriff's notice. Kevin says he's working on a restructuring plan, but he needs time." "Kevin is lying to you, Dad," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "There is no restructuring. The business is gone. The equipment was liquidated 3 weeks ago. I looked it up on the public records." My father's face went gray. "But he's a winner. He's always been the one with the vision. You're the practical one. You can talk to the bank. Tell them who we are. Tell them I worked 30 years at the plant. The bank doesn't care about your years at the plant. They care about the signature on the guarantee. You gave Kevin your life savings, and then you gave him your roof. Why are you here? We need $20,000 to stall the foreclosure," he whispered, "just to get us through the summer. Then Kevin will have his new project up and running." I looked past him to the living room. Lily was on the rug, laughing at a cartoon. She looked healthy. She looked happy. I thought about that $5 gift card sitting in the trash. I thought about my mother telling a child she hadn't achieved enough to deserve a real Christmas present while she was literally healing from a surgical incision in her chest. "I have the money," I said. "I did. I had a college fund for Lily and a decent rainy day car fund." My father's eyes lit up. He actually reached out to pat my shoulder. "I knew I could count on you. You've always been the steady one." "I'm not giving it to you," I said. He froze. "What?" "I'm not giving you a dime. If I give you $20,000, it'll be gone in a month, and you'll still lose the house. You're pouring water into a sieve. But more importantly, Dad, that money is for Lily's achievements. Since she doesn't have a basketball trophy yet, I need to make sure her future is secure." He started to get angry then. The old version of him came back. "You'd let your own mother sleep on the street? Over a grudge? Over a Christmas gift? You're being small, David. You're being petty." "I'm being a father," I said. "Something you forgot how to be a long time ago. Good night, Dad." I closed the door. I had to lock it because he started pounding on the wood, yelling about how ungrateful I was for all the sacrifices they made. I ignored him. I turned up the volume on the TV and sat down next to my daughter. The fallout was messy. My parents had to do a short sale on the house. They lost almost everything. My mother's friends from her social clubs disappeared once the big house with the manicured lawn was gone. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a rougher part of town, ironically closer to Kevin's last known address. Kevin didn't help them move. I know because I got a frantic email from my aunt asking if I could provide a truck. I didn't reply. I heard they had to hire cheap movers who broke my mother's antique china cabinet, the one she used to tell me I wasn't allowed to touch because it was worth more than my car. It's been a few months since then. Life is surprisingly quiet. We blocked them on everything. My wife and I stopped going to family events where they might be present. We started our own traditions. For Easter, we didn't go to a big performative brunch. We went hiking, just the 3 of us. Last week, Lily's debate win was a big deal for her. She had worked so hard on her opening statement. When the judges announced her name, she didn't look for a trophy or a check. She looked at me and her mom. We were in the front row, and we were the only ones there. No golden child, no filtered excellence, just us. We went to that steakhouse, and the bill was definitely more than $5. As we were leaving, Lily saw a kid at another table getting a massive birthday cake with sparklers. She looked at me and said, "Dad, am I a winner now?" I knelt down so I was eye level with her. "Lily, you were a winner the second you walked out of that hospital. You don't ever have to win a trophy to be enough for us. You're already at the top of the scoreboard." The piece lasted exactly 4 months. Then, the office phone on my desk rang. It was late July, a Tuesday afternoon. The receptionist told me my brother was on line 1. He had tried my cell, but since I had blocked his number, he tracked down my workplace. I almost told her to hang up, but curiosity is a funny thing. I wanted to hear the golden boy's voice now that the gold had chipped off. I picked up the receiver. "Davy," Kevin said. His voice was tight, missing the usual practice charm. He only called me Davy when he was about to ask for something he knew he shouldn't. "It's David," I said, staring out the window at the parking lot. "What do you want, Kevin?" "Look, man, I know things have been tense. Mom and Dad told me about the misunderstanding over the house, but we're family, and right now, I'm in a bind. A real bind, Dave. The Doggy Day Spa wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a failure, and it cost our parents their retirement. That wasn't my fault." His voice spiked, a whine bleeding into the anger. "The market shifted. The supply chain for the organic shampoos dried up. It was out of my control." "What do you want, Kevin?" I repeated, colder this time. He took a breath. "I need $40,000. Just a bridge loan. The investors from the franchise are trying to pierce the corporate veil. They're coming after me personally because of some clerical errors with how the funds were managed. They're talking about fraud charges, Dave. I need a retainer for a defense lawyer by Friday." He commingled the funds. Of course he did. He probably used the business loan to pay for his Chicago steakhouses and tailored suits. "Call Dad," I said. "Dad is tapped out. They're renting a 2-bedroom dump next to a highway. They barely have grocery money. Sounds like you owe them an apology." "Davy, please. I'll lose everything. They could put me in jail." "Then you better start practicing your jump shot," I said. "Maybe you can win a tournament in there and Dad will send you a $5 gift card for the commissary." I hung up. I didn't wait to hear his reaction. I unplugged the desk phone for the rest of the day. My hands weren't shaking. I didn't feel a knot in my stomach. I just felt tired of the absolute predictability of it all. They always break things, and they always expect me to bring the glue. 2 weeks later, the reality of their new life hit me in the face. I was at a discount hardware store on the edge of town, 3 towns over from where we lived. I was buying bulk bags of mulch for a weekend landscaping project. I pushed my heavy cart down the aisle, turned the corner, and froze. My mother was standing in the clearance section. She was looking at a shelf of marked-down, dented cans of paint. The change in her appearance was physical, almost violent. Her hair, which used to be professionally colored and styled every 3 weeks, was grown out, showing an inch of stark white roots. She was wearing a faded cardigan over a plain t-shirt. This was the woman who used to refuse to check the mail without putting on lipstick and pearls. She looked up and saw me. We made eye contact from 20 feet away. For a second, I thought she might pretend not to know me. That would have been her old move, the silent treatment, but desperation Separation strips away pride. She abandoned her basket and walked toward me. Her steps were slower. She looked 10 years older than she had at Christmas. David, she said. Her voice was thin. I didn't know you shopped here. I don't usually. It's close to the lumberyard. I kept my hands on the handle of the shopping cart. I didn't lean in for a hug. She looked at the massive bags of mulch in my cart. Must be nice, having a yard to take care of. I didn't take the bait. How are you, Mom? How do you think? She snapped, the bitterness rising instantly. We live in a box. Your father's arthritis is flaring up because of the stairs, and the building manager won't fix the elevator. We had to sell the dining set, the one my grandmother gave me. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Because you could have stopped it. You had the money to bridge the gap. Your father told me. You sat in your big, comfortable house and decided to let your own parents lose everything over a petty grudge. It was incredible. The gymnastics her mind had to do to make this my fault. Kevin lost your house, Mom, I said, keeping my voice flat and even. Kevin forged a business plan, took your signature, and flushed your equity down the drain while posting pictures of oysters on the internet. I didn't sign the papers. I didn't lie to you. Kevin is going through a very dark time, she hissed, her face flushing red. He might face legal trouble. He's struggling. He needs our support. And Leo had to quit the travel basketball team. The fees were too high. His whole future derailed because we couldn't help him. That was it. That was the core of it. She wasn't grieving the house as much as she was grieving the loss of her golden grandson status. Leo will survive, I said. He can play for the school team, like a normal kid. He's not normal. He's exceptional, she practically shouted, drawing the attention of a guy in the plumbing aisle. But you wouldn't understand that. You've always just been average. I looked at this woman, the woman who birthed me. She had nothing left. No house, no money, no social standing. She was standing in a discount hardware store in stained sweatpants, and she was still trying to find a way to look down on me. You're right, I said softly. I am average. I have an average house, an average lawn, and an average savings account that isn't being drained by a con artist. And my average daughter with her average heart is healthy and safe. I started pushing my cart past her. David, she called out. If you walk away now, don't ever come looking for us when you realize you need your family. I stopped, looked over my shoulder, and gave her the most honest answer I've ever given anyone in my life. Mom, I stopped looking for you years ago. You just finally stopped making me pretend. I pushed the cart to the register, paid for my mulch, and drove home. I didn't check my rearview mirror. December rolled around again, the 1-year anniversary of Lily's surgery. We didn't go to a family dinner. We didn't buy a mountain of presents. My wife and I rented a small, secluded cabin up in the mountains, about 3 hours away from the city. It had a wood-burning stove and a massive window overlooking a frozen lake. There was no cell service. It was intentional. On Christmas Eve, the exact day everything had fallen apart the year before, we were sitting on the rug in front of the fire. We were playing a terrible, overly complicated board game that Lily had picked out. We were eating frozen pizzas we had heated up in the cabin's tiny oven. There was no formal dining room, no crystal glasses, no speeches about pride and victory. Lily rolled the dice, moved her little plastic token across the board, and landed on a penalty space. She groaned, throwing her head back against the couch. I'm losing, she announced. Dad, you're hoarding all the resource cards. It's not fair. That's the game, kid, I smiled, holding up my hand of cards. Strategic dominance. She threw a crumpled up napkin at my head. We laughed. It was loud, chaotic, and entirely ours. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep in the loft bedroom, my wife and I sat by the dying fire. She rested her head on my shoulder, looking out at the snow falling steadily in the dark. Do you think about them? She asked quietly. I took a sip of my drink. I thought about my dad, probably sitting in a cramped apartment, staring at a blank wall. I thought about Kevin, wherever he was, dodging process servers. I thought about my mom, clinging to the memory of a basketball trophy. Sometimes, I said, like you think about a bad car accident you saw on the highway. You hope everyone is okay, but you're just glad you weren't in the car. I set my glass down on the wooden table. The fire popped, sending a shower of orange sparks up the chimney. 3 years passed. The silence that started as a heavy blanket eventually just became the air we breathed. We moved to a different school district, a quiet neighborhood with older trees and wider sidewalks. Lily turned 14. She grew 5 inches and started rolling her eyes when I made bad dad jokes, but she still let me proofread her history papers. The past only came back to us through the occasional ripple in the legal system. Kevin didn't get his bridge loan. The investors did piece the corporate veil, and the fraud charges stuck. He took a plea deal to avoid a trial that would have exposed exactly how much he had stolen from his own franchise to fund his lifestyle. He got 36 months in a minimum security federal camp in Pennsylvania. I found out through a Google alert I had set up with his name, just to make sure he wasn't trying to open credit cards in my identity. Then came a rainy Thursday in late October. I was at my desk eating a lukewarm turkey sandwich when my cell phone vibrated. Caller ID showed a local county government number. I answered. It was a social worker from the Department of Adult Protective Services. Mr. Miller, I'm calling regarding your parents, Henry and Barbara. My chewing stopped. The bread felt like ash in my mouth. What about them? They were evicted from their apartment on Tuesday. Your father had a minor stroke last week, and your mother is unable to provide the necessary physical care. The hospital discharged him, but they have nowhere to go. They've been placed in a temporary county hold facility. We're trying to locate next of kin to establish a care plan. I looked at the spreadsheet on my monitor. The numbers blurred together. They have another son, Kevin. We are aware, the social worker said. Her voice was pure bureaucratic exhaustion. He is currently incarcerated. You are the only local relative on file. I see. We need someone to come down and sign the intake paperwork, or potentially take custody of their care. If no family steps in, they become wards of the state. They'll be placed in whatever Medicaid-funded nursing facility has open beds. And to be frank, Mr. Miller, those facilities are rarely pleasant. She was waiting for me to gasp, to say I'd be right there, to ask what they needed. What's the address of your office? I asked. She gave it to me. I took an early lunch, got in my car, and drove down to the county administration building. It was a concrete block from the 70s, smelling faintly of damp wool and industrial floor wax. I was directed to a small conference room on the second floor. When I opened the door, the air felt stagnant. My parents were sitting in 2 gray plastic chairs. Dad was in a wheelchair. The stroke had pulled the left side side of his face downward, and his left arm rested uselessly in his lap. He looked hollowed out, staring blankly at the linoleum floor. Mom was sitting next to him. She was holding a plastic grocery bag containing what looked like their medication bottles and a few folded clothes. She was painfully thin. She looked up when I walked in. For a second, a spark of the old arrogance flared in her eyes, followed immediately by desperate relief. "David," she breathed. She stood up, her hands trembling. I told them my son would come. They were treating us like vagrants. Tell them we aren't vagrants." The social worker, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, sat across the table. She slid a thick manila folder toward me. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming. We have two options here. You can sign as the primary guarantor and medical proxy, which means you assume responsibility for their housing and care. Or you can sign the declination of responsibility, and the state will petition for emergency guardianship tomorrow morning." Mom reached out and grabbed my forearm. Her grip was weak, her fingers cold. "We can stay in your guest room," she said. It wasn't a question. It was the old habit of giving orders. "Just until Kevin gets out. He's up for parole in 8 months. He has a plan, David. A tech startup. He just needs a little time to get on his feet, and then he'll buy us a condo." I looked down at her hand on my arm. I thought about the hospital waiting room. I thought about the $5 gift card. I thought about the 24-hour tech support, the free landscaping, the thousands of dollars I had poured into a black hole trying to buy their respect. And I realized something profound in that sterile county office. I didn't hate them anymore. You can only hate people who still have power over you. I just felt sorry for them. They had gambled their entire lives on an illusion, and they were going to die empty-handed. I gently pulled my arm away from her grasp. I sat down at the table, picked up the cheap blue pen the social worker had left out, and flipped to the second option, the declination of responsibility. "David, what are you doing?" Mom's voice spiked, a shrill panic cutting through the quiet room. Dad finally looked up. His right eye locked onto me, wide and frightened. He tried to speak, but it came out as a wet, garbled sound. "I'm signing the papers," I said. My voice was steady. "No," Mom said, stepping forward, hitting the table with her palms. "No, you can't. They'll put us in a home, a state home. You know what those places are like. You can't do this to your family. You made your choices, Mom," I said, signing my name on the first line. "You chose your favorite son. You chose his basketball games over my daughter's heart surgery. You gave him your house. You gave him your future. You don't get to hand me the bill when he goes bankrupt and goes to prison." I flipped the page and signed the second line. "He's a good boy," she screamed. Tears were finally spilling over her cheeks, cutting through the dust and exhaustion on her face. "He just made mistakes. You're punishing us for his mistakes." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. I capped the pen and pushed the folder back to the social worker. "I'm just letting you experience the consequences of your own investments. You invested everything in Kevin. Now you get to wait for his return." I stood up. I didn't look at my father. I knew if I looked at his face again, the ghost of the little boy who just wanted his dad to throw a baseball with him might waver. "Mr. Miller," the social worker said softly, pulling the file toward her. "Thank you for your time. We will take it from here." "You're a monster," my mother whispered. She sank back into the plastic chair, pulling the grocery bag onto her lap, wrapping her arms around it like a shield. "You're a cold, ungrateful monster." I walked to the door and put my hand on the handle. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. I walked out of the conference room, down the stairs, and out the heavy glass doors of the county building. The October air was crisp and smelled like dry leaves. 5 years is a long time when you're raising a teenager, but it's a blink when you're just living a quiet, boring, stable life. Lily turned 18. She didn't become a professional athlete. She didn't launch a tech startup from our garage. She just worked incredibly hard, studied until her eyes were red, and got accepted into a massive out-of-state university on a partial academic and debate scholarship. When the letter arrived, we didn't throw a party to show off to the neighbors. We didn't hand her a giant novelty check. I bought a cheap wooden frame from the craft store, put the acceptance letter inside, and hung it on the wall in the hallway. We ordered her favorite takeout and ate it on the couch. It was the best night of my life. The next morning, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a state government area code. I knew what it was before I answered. You never really stop expecting the other shoe to drop, even when you're standing barefoot in your own living room. It was a facility administrator from the state nursing home. "Mr. Miller? I'm calling about your father, Henry. I signed the declination of responsibility 5 years ago," I said, my voice automatically shifting into that flat, defensive tone I hadn't used in half a decade. "I know, sir. It's noted in his file. I'm only calling because state law requires us to notify all known next of kin in the event of a resident's passing. Your father had a massive cardiac event at 4 this morning. He didn't suffer." I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the bird feeder in the backyard. A blue jay was aggressively pecking at the seeds. "Okay," I said. "Because he is a ward of the state with no assets, the county will handle the disposition of the remains," the administrator continued, completely unfazed by my lack of emotion. "It will be a basic cremation and interment at the county annex cemetery. If you wish to claim the remains privately, you have 48 hours to contact a funeral home." "I don't," I said. "Let the county handle it." "Understood. The interment is scheduled for Thursday at 10 in the morning. Plot 412. You are not required to attend, but family is permitted." She hung up. I put the phone down on the granite counter. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a sudden rush of regret or a wave of suppressed grief. I just felt a strange, hollow finality. The man who had spent his life keeping score had finally run out of time on the clock. I didn't tell Lily. She was busy packing for a weekend trip with her friends, and I wasn't going to ruin her celebration with the ghost of a grandfather who didn't even think she deserved a Christmas present. I told my wife. She hugged me tight, asked if I was okay, and asked if I wanted to go to the burial. "I think I have to," I said, just to close the book. Thursday morning was bleak. It was early April, the kind of day where the sky is a flat, bruised purple and the air smells like wet concrete. The county annex cemetery wasn't a peaceful meadow. It was a flat, treeless expanse of land backed right up against the interstate highway. The graves weren't marked with grand marble statues. They had small, flat concrete blocks with metal number plates. I parked my car on the gravel shoulder and walked out into the damp grass. There was no tent, no rows of folding chairs, just a hole in the ground, a small, cheap urn resting on a green piece of artificial turf, and a guy in a high-visibility jacket leaning against a backhoe, waiting to fill the dirt back in. A county chaplain was standing by the hole, holding a small binder. He looked looked bored, and standing across from him, shivering in a thin windbreaker, was my brother. Kevin had been out of federal prison for almost 2 years. I hadn't seen him since before his trial. The change was shocking. The golden boy was completely gone. He was balding, his posture was hunched, and the tailored suits had been replaced by baggy khakis and shoes that were scuffed white at the toes. He looked like a man who had spent the last 3 years eating powdered eggs and realizing he wasn't the smartest guy in the room anymore. He looked up and saw me walking toward the plot. He stiffened, pulling the collar of his cheap jacket up against the wind. I stood on the opposite side of the urn. The chaplain looked between us, cleared his throat, and started reading a generic 2-minute prayer about peace and eternal rest. He didn't say my father's name once. He just said, "Our departed brother." The whole time, the low roar of the semi-trucks on the interstate drowned out half the words. When the chaplain finished, he nodded to us, got in his dusty sedan, and drove away. The guy with the backhoe started the engine. I turned to leave. "Dave," Kevin called out. His voice was raspy. He sounded like our dad. I stopped, but I didn't walk toward him. I just waited. He walked around the hole, avoiding looking down at the urn. He stopped a few feet away from me. Up close, I could see the broken blood vessels on his cheeks and the dark, exhausted bags under his eyes. "You didn't come to see Mom," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It sounded like a plea. "No, she's in the memory care ward now," he said, rubbing his hands together to stay warm. "Dementia. It hit her fast after Dad's first stroke. I went to see her last month. She didn't know who I was, Dave. She thought I was the orderly. She asked me to fetch her a glass of water and told me I wasn't allowed to touch her china. And I just looked at him. I remembered the china cabinet the cheap movers had shattered. That sounds about right." Kevin swallowed hard. "I'm working at a car wash in the valley. It's the only place that would hire a felon with a fraud conviction. I live in a halfway house, but my time there is up next week. I don't have enough saved for first and last month's rent on a studio." There it was, the inevitable pivot. Even standing over the county-funded ashes of the father he bankrupted, Kevin was still looking for a loan. "That's tough," I said. "Dave, I have nothing." He stepped closer, his eyes wide and panicked. "Dad's gone. Mom is basically gone. I'm 50 years old and I'm scrubbing rims for minimum wage. I made mistakes. God, I know I made mistakes. But I paid for them. I did my time." "You did the state's time," I corrected him. "You didn't pay for anything. Dad paid for it with his house. Mom paid for it with her mind. I'm your brother," he said, his voice cracking. A tear actually rolled down his cheek, cutting through the grime. "We're all we have left. Please, just a couple thousand. Just to get an apartment. I'll pay you back every cent. I swear to God, Dave." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the kid who used to break my toys and then cry to our parents so I would get grounded. I saw the guy who took thousands from our dad while sending us postcards from luxury resorts. I saw the man who abandoned his parents to a state facility because he was too busy hiding from the SEC. "Do you remember what Dad gave Leo when he made the starting lineup?" I asked. Kevin blinked, confused by the shift. "What? The laptop?" "I don't. He gave him a gaming laptop and $1,000, I said softly, the roar of the highway filling the space between us. "He gave a 13-year-old $1,000 because he said pride is earned through victory. Do you remember what Mom gave Lily? She had just had her chest cut open. Mom gave her a $5 gift card for chicken nuggets and a picture of your kid." Kevin looked down at his scuffed shoes. "They were obsessed with Leo. They were obsessed with winning. They were obsessed with times you," I said. "You were their winner. They bet the entire house on you. Literally." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I opened it. I didn't have any cash, just my cards. But tucked behind my driver's license was the exact same $5 fast food gift card my mother had handed my daughter all those years ago. Lily had tried to throw it away, but I had dug it out of the trash. I kept it as a reminder, a little piece of plastic to ensure I never, ever forgot the score. I pulled the card out. It was bent and slightly faded from being in my wallet for years. I held it out to him. Kevin looked at it, his face twisted in confusion. Then slowly, dawn broke over his features. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His face went completely slack. "What is this?" he whispered. "It's an investment," I said, my voice completely devoid of anger. "Winners get laptops, Kevin. Losers get nuggets. That's the family rule." Dad made it very clear. I dropped the gift card on the damp ground right at the toe of his worn-out shoe. I didn't wait to see if he picked it up. I turned my back on my brother, on the cheap urn, and on the dirt the backhoe was starting to push into the hole. I walked back to my car, my shoes crunching on the gravel. 10 years. That's how long it took for the last thread to finally snap. Lily was 21. We were sitting in the aluminum bleachers of her university stadium, the bright May sun beating down on my neck. The crowd was a restless sea of folding fans, noise, and oversized floral bouquets. When the dean called Lily's name for her degree in public policy, my wife grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug into my knuckles. I didn't scream or wave a giant foam finger. I just stood up, watched my daughter walk across that stage in her black gown, and took a single, clear photograph on my phone. After the ceremony, we were waiting by the stadium gates for her to navigate through the sea of graduates. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a LinkedIn notification, a direct message. I opened it. It was from Leo. He was 24 now. His profile picture wasn't him in a basketball jersey holding a trophy. It was just a guy in a slightly wrinkled blue button-down shirt. His job title said he was a logistics coordinator for a regional grocery chain. The message was brief. "Uncle David, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just thought you should know Grandma passed away last Tuesday. The state facility called my dad, but he didn't tell me until yesterday. He asked me for money for a memorial, but I know he just needs it for his rent. I didn't give it to him. I also wanted to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for laughing at Lily that Christmas. I was a stupid kid, and my dad and grandparents made me feel like I was the center of the universe because I could shoot a ball. When the money ran out and the basketball stopped, they stopped caring about me too. I get it now. I hope you guys are good." I stood there by the brick pillar of the stadium, reading the words twice. The noise of the graduating class around me seemed to dial down to a low hum. I didn't feel a spike of triumph. I didn't want to gloat. I just felt a profound, quiet sadness for the kid who had been handed a $1,000 check and a rigged game, only to find out the hard way that the prize was completely worthless. He had to learn the exact same lesson I did, just from the opposite side of the table. I typed a response with my thumb. "Leo, you were 13. You You were playing the script they handed you. Don't carry their debt. Build a quiet life for yourself, and don't look back. Take care. I hit send. I didn't block him, but I knew we would probably never speak again. The bloodline was severed. The cycle was broken. He was free to figure out his own life, and I was entirely focused on mine. Who was that? My wife asked, handing me a cold bottle of water. Nobody, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Just an old update. Nothing important. Then Lily found us. She was practically vibrating with energy, the leather degree cover clutched tightly in her hand. She threw her arms around my neck, smelling like cheap hairspray and pure adrenaline. We did it, Dad, she laughed, pulling back to look at me, her eyes shining. You did it, Lil, I corrected her, tapping the degree cover. I just bought the groceries and kept the Wi-Fi running. We walked out to the parking lot. I didn't buy her a gaming laptop. I didn't write her a massive check with a speech about legacy. I tossed her the keys to my old Honda Civic, told her I had paid for the next 6 months of insurance to get her started at her new paralegal job, and said we were taking her to the best Italian place in the city to celebrate. She caught the keys in the air. She looked at them, then at me, and smiled. It was a real smile, not a performance for an audience, not a smug grin over a defeated rival, just genuine, solid happiness. 7 years after Lily walked across that graduation stage, I found myself sitting in another hospital waiting room. Hospitals always smell the same. It's a mix of industrial floor cleaner, stale coffee, and underlying anxiety. My knees popped when I shifted in the vinyl chair. I was 62 now. The gray in my hair wasn't just at the temples anymore. It had taken over entirely. My wife was leaning against my shoulder, dozing softly, a paperback book resting in her lap. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. We weren't there for a heart procedure. We were there because Lily was in labor with her first child. She had married a guy named Mark 3 years earlier. Mark wasn't a venture capitalist or a hotshot lawyer. He was a middle school science teacher who drove a Subaru with a cracked taillight and spent his weekends rebuilding old bicycles. He was quiet, steady, and he looked at my daughter like she hung the moon. When he asked for my blessing, he didn't try to impress me with his earning potential. He just sat at my kitchen table, drank a beer with me, and promised he would never let her carry a heavy load alone. That was all I needed to hear. The double doors to the maternity ward pushed open. Mark walked out. He was still wearing his blue scrubs, his hair sticking up in every direction. He looked completely exhausted and entirely terrified, which is exactly how a new father should look. He saw us, and a massive, watery smile broke across his face. She's here, he said, his voice cracking. They're both perfect. My wife shot up from the chair, the paperback hitting the linoleum floor. She hugged Mark so hard I thought she was going to crack his ribs. I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. He pulled me into the hug, too. You did good, Mark, I said. She did all the work, he laughed, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Come on, she wants to see you. We followed him down the long, brightly lit hallway. I thought about the last time I sat in a hospital waiting for news about Lily. I thought about my father deciding a middle school basketball game was more important than his granddaughter's life. I remembered the heavy, suffocating silence of my phone not ringing. Tonight, my phone was off. There was nowhere else in the world I needed to be. Mark pushed open the door to room 410. The lights were dimmed. Lily was lying in the hospital bed. She looked like she had just gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring, pale and sweating, but her eyes were bright and fiercely alert. Resting on her chest was a tiny bundle wrapped in a striped receiving blanket. We walked in quietly. My wife went straight to the side of the bed, pressing her forehead against Lily's and whispering something I couldn't hear. Then Lily looked up at me. She carefully scooped up the little bundle, supporting the neck, and held her out toward me. Meet your granddaughter, Dad, she whispered. We named her Maya. I reached out and took the baby. She was incredibly light, weighing barely 7 pounds, but holding her felt like holding the center of gravity. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her little fists curled tight under her chin. She let out a tiny, squeaky breath. I looked down at her face, tracing the soft curve of her cheek with my thumb. I didn't think about what college she would go to. I didn't care if she ever won a spelling bee, made a varsity team, or brought home a plastic trophy. I didn't care if she turned out to be average, extraordinary, or completely ordinary. Hey, Maya, I whispered, keeping my voice low. I'm your grandpa. Lily shifted in the bed, wincing slightly as she propped herself up on a pillow. We didn't get her a welcome home gift yet, she smiled, looking at Mark. We were too busy panicking about the car seat. That's all right, I said, not taking my eyes off the baby. She doesn't need anything. I stood there in the quiet hum of the hospital monitors. The generational curse that had infected my family for decades, the relentless keeping of scores, the transactional love, the cruel, conditional metrics of worth it, all stopped right here. It hit a concrete wall named David Miller, and it shattered. Maya would never know the sting of a $5 gift card handed out as an insult. She would never have to watch her parents set themselves on fire to keep an illusion warm. She would never have to earn her place at our table. Her seat was already reserved, paid for in full, forever. I handed the baby back to her mother. Mark stepped up behind Lily, wrapping his arms around her shoulders, looking down at his new family. They looked tired, happy, and incredibly safe. I put my arm around my wife's waist. We stood at the foot of the bed and just watched them. The room was small, the hospital coffee was terrible, and the night was long. It was the richest I have ever felt in my entire life.